Buckle up, guys. Today we're stepping into a courtroom where what appears to be a routine hearing slowly unfolds into something far more serious. The judge begins the session with a simple but crucial question, confirming the identity of the defendant, Adrian Hayward Jr. These opening moments might sound procedural, but in the courtroom every word matters. When the defense attorney waives the formal reading of the indictment, it signals that both sides already know exactly what this case is about. The atmosphere feels calm, almost ordinary, but experienced courtroom observers know that these quiet beginnings often lead to decisions that can completely change someone's future. At this stage, the judge is establishing the official record, making sure the right person is standing before the court and that the legal process moves forward correctly. The defendant answers respectfully, and the process begins to move quickly. This is the moment where a defendant's fate begins to formally take shape. In many criminal cases, these first few minutes set the tone for everything that follows. The judge maintains a controlled, professional tone, but the seriousness of the environment is undeniable. Courtrooms operate with strict structure, and every question asked has a legal purpose. What may look simple on the surface is actually the foundation of the entire legal proceeding. Everyone present understands that the next steps will determine how the law responds to the allegations against the defendant. And as the hearing continues, the court begins moving closer to the central issue of the case. Now the courtroom transitions from basic identification into the core of the case. The judge formally states the charge against Adrian Hayward Jr., and the language immediately raises the seriousness of the situation. He is accused of a third-degree felony involving assault family violence by impeding breath or circulation. In legal terms, this type of charge is extremely serious because it suggests that the alleged victim's ability to breathe was restricted during the incident. Laws surrounding family violence are designed to address situations where personal relationships turn dangerous, and courts treat these accusations with a high level of concern. When the judge reads the charge, the courtroom atmosphere subtly shifts. This is no longer just paperwork or procedure. It's the moment where the allegations become clearly stated on record. The judge then asks the defendant the most critical question in any criminal proceeding. How do you plead? This question carries enormous weight because the answer determines the entire direction of the case. A not guilty plea would send the case toward trial, where evidence and witnesses would be examined. But a guilty plea means the defendant is admitting responsibility for the crime. When defendants choose to plead guilty, it often means an agreement has been reached with prosecutors. These agreements are carefully negotiated and can shape sentencing outcomes. At this moment, the defendant acknowledges the charge and confirms his plea. Even though the exchange happens quickly, it represents a turning point in the legal process. From here, the judge must carefully confirm that this plea is valid and legally acceptable before moving forward. With the guilty plea now spoken in court, the judge moves into an important verification process. Courts never accept a plea without ensuring that it was made voluntarily and with full understanding of its consequences. The judge asks a series of direct questions designed to protect the integrity of the legal system. She asks whether the defendant is pleading guilty freely and voluntarily, without pressure or coercion. This step is extremely important because the law requires that defendants make these decisions of their own free will. If a plea were forced or misunderstood, it could later be challenged and potentially overturned. The judge also asks whether Hayward is pleading guilty because he actually committed the act described in the charge. This question might seem simple, but it's a critical safeguard. It ensures that the court is not punishing someone who is simply trying to resolve a case quickly without admitting responsibility. Every answer given here becomes part of the official court record. Judges must be absolutely certain that the defendant understands what is happening before accepting a plea. In this moment, the courtroom slows down slightly as the judge carefully checks each requirement. This process protects both the defendant and the justice system itself. If everything is confirmed properly, the court can proceed confidently knowing the plea was legitimate. The exchange may appear brief to outside viewers, but legally it carries enormous significance. Now the judge turns her attention to during those 5 years, Hayward must follow every rule placed upon him by the court and by the probation department. That could include reporting regularly to a probation officer, staying out of trouble, attending counseling programs, and following any additional restrictions the court decides to impose. If he completes those requirements successfully, the case may eventually be dismissed, giving him a chance to move forward without a permanent felony conviction. But if he violates even one major condition, the court could immediately revoke probation and impose a much harsher sentence. That could mean prison time for the original felony charge. This is why judges take time to explain probation agreements clearly in open court. They want defendants to fully understand that probation is not simply freedom, it is a structured legal supervision designed to keep them accountable. The judge asks Hayward directly if this agreement matches his understanding, and he confirms that it does. That confirmation is critical because once the judge accepts the agreement, it becomes binding under the law. In these moments, the courtroom remains calm, but the stakes are extremely high. What seems like a simple conversation about probation is actually the moment where the defendant officially accepts a path that could determine the next 5 years of his life. Now the judge introduces another critical warning that many people outside the legal system don't always realize exists. She explains that if the defendant is not a United States citizen, entering a guilty plea could have serious immigration consequences. Under federal law, certain criminal convictions can result in deportation, denial of naturalization, or exclusion from being allowed to return to the country. This warning is not optional for judges, it is a legally required advisement meant to protect defendants from unknowingly accepting consequences that extend far beyond the criminal courtroom. Immigration consequences can sometimes be even more life-altering than the criminal penalty itself. Someone might accept probation in a criminal case thinking it resolves the situation, only to later face immigration enforcement that could remove them from the country entirely. Because of that risk, courts must clearly state this warning on the record whenever a plea is entered. The judge calmly explains this possibility to Hayward and ensures that he understands. Even though the hearing continues smoothly, this moment highlights how interconnected different areas of law can be. A single criminal decision can ripple into immigration law, employment opportunities, and long-term personal consequences. Once the judge finishes explaining the immigration warning, the prosecution formally submits the signed documents into evidence. The defense states that they have no objection, meaning both sides agree that the documents accurately represent the plea agreement. With that confirmation, the judge officially admits the documents into the court record. This might sound like a technical step, but it's actually a very important legal moment. By admitting the documents into evidence, the court locks in the agreement as part of the permanent record of the case. From here, the judge can move forward with determining whether to accept the plea and proceed with the next stage of the case. At this point, the judge performs another essential step before finalizing the plea. She asks whether there is any evidence suggesting that the defendant is not mentally competent. Competency is a fundamental requirement in criminal law. A defendant must be able to understand the charges, communicate with their attorney, and comprehend the consequences of their decisions. If there were concerns about mental competency, the court would have to pause the proceedings and potentially order a psychological evaluation before moving forward. In this case, there is no indication that Hayward lacks competency, so the judge proceeds with the next step. She formally states on the record that the defendant entered his plea freely and voluntarily and that he understands the nature and consequences of the plea. These words carry enormous legal weight. Once the judge makes this finding, the court officially recognizes the plea as valid. She also states that there is sufficient evidence to support a finding of guilt. That means the court now considers the defendant legally guilty of the felony charge. However, instead of moving directly to sentencing, the judge decides to gather more information before making the final decision about punishment. She announces that the case will be reset so that the probation department can prepare a pre-sentence investigation report. These reports are extremely detailed and can include information about the defendant's criminal history, personal background, employment situation, family circumstances, and any factors that might influence sentencing. Judges rely on these reports to make more informed and balanced decisions. By ordering a pre-sentence report, the judge is signaling that she wants a complete understanding of the defendant before determining the final outcome. Now the prosecutor steps forward with an additional concern that adds a new layer of tension to the hearing. While the current charge does not involve the use of a firearm, The prosecutor mentions that there are allegations in the police reports suggesting that Hayward brandished a gun during the incident. This detail immediately raises the seriousness of the situation. Firearms dramatically increase the potential danger in any violent encounter, especially in cases involving personal relationships or domestic disputes. Even if the weapon was not used, the act of displaying or threatening with a firearm can significantly influence how the court views the overall situation. The judge listens carefully to the prosecutor's statement because information like this can affect bond conditions and future sentencing decisions. Prosecutors often raise these concerns to ensure that the court is aware of potential safety risks before allowing a defendant to be released. This moment also demonstrates how police reports and witness statements can introduce details that go beyond the exact wording of the charge. While the formal accusation focuses on assault by impeding breath, the surrounding circumstances may still influence the court's decisions moving forward. The atmosphere in the courtroom remains professional, but the mention of a firearm shifts the tone slightly. It reminds everyone present that the case involves serious allegations and that the court must consider the safety of the alleged victim as well as the community. As the hearing continues, the judge prepares to address those concerns by asking additional questions and considering conditions that could limit the defendant's behavior while the case moves toward sentencing. Alright, guys, now the judge shifts focus to the bond and safety measures, which are critical moments in any criminal hearing. After reviewing the initial plea, she asks Hayward about his relationship with Rihanna Mlan. He clarifies that she's his ex-girlfriend's cousin, establishing that there's no ongoing connection that would justify contact. This step is essential because courts always want to prevent future confrontations or risks to victims. The judge then reduces his bond to $1,000, a decision that might allow him temporary freedom before sentencing, but it comes with strict rules. These conditions are non-negotiable. Hayward is prohibited from contacting the victim in any way, no visits, messages, social media, or indirect communication. Even accidental encounters require him to leave immediately. The judge is making it crystal clear. The victim's safety is a priority, and any violation could lead to immediate consequences. This segment is a perfect example of how the courtroom balances opportunity for the defendant with protection for the community, turning procedural details into high-stakes reality. Now, the judge introduces an additional layer of restriction that adds tension. Hayward is told he cannot possess firearms under any circumstances. This is not just a warning, it's a legal order with serious consequences. If he owns any guns, he must remove them immediately from his home or car. The judge even emphasizes that family members cannot hold them on his behalf. This condition directly responds to the earlier allegation of brandishing a firearm. By establishing this rule, the court ensures that the risk to the victim and the community is minimized. The judge pauses to confirm understanding, showing how seriously the court treats compliance. Even though the bond reduction might seem like a leniency, these restrictions make it clear that freedom comes with responsibility. It's a fine balance. The court is giving the defendant a chance to maintain his liberty while keeping safety and order paramount. This segment demonstrates how judges layer conditions to prevent repeat offenses while adhering to legal procedures. The careful wording of restrictions ensures they are enforceable and leaves no room for misinterpretation. At this point, the hearing fully transitions into the enforcement and compliance phase. The judge ensures Hayward understands all aspects of his bond conditions. She asks if he has questions, and when he confirms understanding, the courtroom moves to close this portion of the case. The structured interaction here is crucial. Every statement is recorded and enforceable. The judge's thorough approach guarantees that the defendant cannot later claim ignorance of the rules. By doing this, the court protects the victim while providing the defendant with a clear framework for maintaining his freedom. This step also reinforces the seriousness of legal compliance. While the discussion may feel repetitive, each phrase serves as a protective measure against potential violations. The judge then schedules the next hearing for sentencing, ensuring that all interim conditions are followed. This moment highlights how courts use pre-sentencing periods not as a formality but as an opportunity to monitor behavior and ensure public safety. The tension is subtle but present. The defendant now understands that any slip-up could have immediate and serious consequences. Now the focus shifts to the second defendant, Jalen Hendricks, adding another layer of courtroom intensity. The judge reviews his previous cases, noting that he pled guilty in 2 separate incidents of evading arrest with a motor vehicle. This establishes a pattern of high-risk behavior, which courts take very seriously. She then outlines the consequences, 10-year sentences for each case, but these will be probated, meaning he avoids immediate incarceration if he follows probation rules. Still, he must serve 30 days in county jail and pay fines. The judge emphasizes that probation is an opportunity, not a free pass. Any violation, and Hendricks will face the full sentence. She also stresses the importance of following treatment recommendations, avoiding vehicles without a license, and staying away from firearms. This segment combines clarity and tension, making it easy for viewers to understand the gravity of probation conditions while keeping them engaged. The structure of this part perfectly shows the balance between judicial leniency and accountability, a moment that keeps the audience on the edge of their seats. Alright, guys, now we're at the final chapter of this courtroom session, where everything comes together and the fates of both defendants are officially decided. The judge delivers the final outcomes for Jalen Hendricks, summarizing both of his cases. In each case, he had pled guilty to evading arrest with a motor vehicle, and the judge sentences him to 10 years in prison for each charge, but probates those sentences. That means, if Hendricks fully complies with all probation conditions, he avoids incarceration for the full term. The court also imposes a $500 fine and 30 days in county jail, for which he receives credit for time already served. These steps finalize his legal responsibilities, showing how probation serves as both an opportunity and a strict accountability mechanism. The judge then reinforces the key probation conditions. Hendricks must follow all rules without exception, including mental health treatment, counseling, and prescribed medication if required. He is strictly forbidden from driving any vehicle without a license, and he cannot possess any firearms or ammunition, as Texas law prohibits it after felony convictions. The judge emphasizes that these rules are not suggestions. They are enforceable mandates, and any violation could immediately send him back to court to serve the full 10-year sentence for each case. Meanwhile, for Adrian Hayward Jr., the probation and bond conditions remain in effect, and his case is now on a clear path towards sentencing after the pre-sentence report is completed. The judge ensures the record reflects that Hayward understands every requirement and consequence. Both cases now illustrate the balance the court maintains between public safety, victim protection, and giving defendants a structured opportunity to rehabilitate. With both cases concluded, the courtroom hearing officially ends. This session highlights the full journey, from charges and pleas to bond conditions, probation agreements, and final sentencing decisions. It's a perfect example of how courts manage multiple cases efficiently while protecting all parties involved. And if you found this detailed courtroom breakdown helpful and engaging, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because we'll continue bringing real cases with in-depth analysis. We'll see you in the next video.